Welcome back to another edition of Just Talking with Joe Burdick. I'm really excited to introduce my next guest. I'm sitting down with Ryan Walters, a former U.S. Army helicopter pilot who served with the legendary 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, better known as the Night Stalkers. Ryan flew some of the most advanced helicopters in the world and in some of the most dangerous missions imaginable. The conversation is a real behind the scenes look at what it's actually like flying special operations helicopters, the pressure, the preparation, and what it's like when it's real. Rob O'Neill described Ryan as one of the best pilots in the world. Ryan, your career took you all over the world from Iraq, Afghanistan, Mali, Senegal, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Poland, and even a night in Pakistan. We're going to get into all that. But before we talk about the missions and the aircraft, I want to start from where it all began. Where did you grow up and what kind of kid were you?
Well, no, first, thanks for having me. I'm glad we're able to get this done despite the awesome winter we're already having here. But appreciate the kind words from folks like Rob O'Neill about the 160th. That's why we exist. But as you can tell by my accent, I'm not from Northeast Ohio originally, so I don't have the pure Midwest accent. But I'll argue that I don't think Cleveland's purely a Midwest city, and maybe we can chat more on that later. But no, I actually grew up in the mountains, the high desert like area off of a dirt road outside of Los Angeles, pretty far from here, and completely different than Northeast Ohio. But I do enjoy it here, and even with the challenges of the weather right now, it's not a bad place, especially in July and August when the weather's primo and the sun is out until 10 p.m. and we got baseball to go watch, right? So
Mm-hmm. So, what kind of kid were you in the high desert of California? Most people don't even realize
yeah,
California has deserts, and even where I was stationed, I was right in the middle of the San Joaquin Valley, so we
yeah.
had nothing but farms and not a drop of water.
I wouldn't know it as a child that I would grow up in an area that looked, kind of uncharacteristically like Afghanistan, and I would spend so much of my military career flying around, the mountains and high altitudes, much, much higher altitudes in Afghanistan. But no, my parents grew up in the San Fernando Valley originally, and they're not both originally from Los Angeles. My dad was actually born in Canada and became a naturalized U.S. citizen, and then my mom and her family grew up in Arkansas and relocated to the greater Los Angeles area for the aerospace industry. And my parents went to school in Burbank and then moved out to a little place called Acton, which is going out towards, Palmdale, Lancaster, kind of on the way to Edwards Air Force Base or China Lake. And yeah, grew up playing sports, mostly soccer, played volleyball in high school a little bit, rode bicycles and dirt bikes and horses. Grew up on a small horse ranch, and the small horse ranch up in the mountains that I grew up on, we kept drilling for well water and never hit a well. So my parents had to have water trucked in. So as you can relate, I got used to taking 3-minute Navy showers as a kid because we simply didn't have the resources growing up on a dirt road. But yeah, it wasn't a bad childhood. It was pretty sheltered, and it was one of those places where nobody back then, in the 80s and 90s messed with you. You could run out the front gate and run around the hills and do whatever you wanted to, without any cares or concerns. And then come back to the house. It was ironic because my dad would ultimately become a police officer, but we used to have to outrun the Los Angeles County Sheriff helicopters. So they used to patrol the area. Sense a little bit of irony here, and they would look for people riding dirt bikes in the mountains, and if they could catch you, they would give you a ticket. So I did spend part of my childhood outrunning helicopters on motorcycles and all that stuff, not knowing that I would ultimately go on to be a helicopter pilot, which is kind of funny. So.
So, what inspired you, or who inspired you to join the army?
Well, go back to the childhood. I was never, I was like fascinated by the military as a kid. Was born in '79, so kind of grew up in the '80s, and all the movies coming out. Was obsessed with Top Gun and Iron Eagle, and all that stuff, and the TV show Tour of Duty. So I was always into military aviation, and I got into high school, went to a really, really small, terrible high school. If you can imagine the same group of like 60 or 70 kids from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade to graduation. So a very, very small community, surrounded by two much larger communities. And yeah, I really had nobody in my family that was like, hey, you should try the military. I kind of went through high school, playing sports as I mentioned earlier, and played soccer and volleyball, and did pretty well. And I had it in my mind that I could have maybe gone on to played sports in college, but I was not academically prepared, and I admittedly wasn't looking back mentally or emotionally or just outright prepared to go to college. So yeah, I did poorly in my exams. I think I took the ACT or SAT, maybe both. I certainly took the ASVAB because I, as you know, ultimately ended up in the Army. But I was never the kid that was like, oh, that he's going to go into the military. That's what he's going to do. Um, there were other kids, around me that were like that, where the recruiters would parade them around. Hey, this kid's joining the Army or the Navy or the Marines, and that just never was me. So I made it through graduation and was working that summer, and just kind of came to the realization that I needed to do something. And I had a neighbor that lived near us, behind us actually, that I remember him, talking about the Army, and he was allegedly a Army Ranger and was in Second Ranger Battalion, and he had given me a copy of his Ranger handbook, which is the handbook you use when you go through the Ranger course, which I would ultimately go through. And I kind of thought, you know what, maybe that's a good path to go out and do something and kind of get out of that environment and go see the world. And it was admittedly extremely difficult, but I remember going to the recruiter, and they kind of, again, ironic, it was a bit of irony, tried to talk me into being a helicopter crew chief. And I politely declined, and I kept going back to the, well, what about the Army Ranger thing? And sure enough, they offered me a Ranger contract, and that's what I signed up for. And that was to be an infantryman. So to go to Fort Benning, Georgia, and go through the infantry boot camp. And then if you pass that, you move on to airborne school and jump out of airplanes. And then if you pass that, you would go through the Ranger indoctrination program at the time. So now it was RIP, and now it's called RASP. And then if you made it through that, you go to one of the three Ranger battalions, and ultimately, compete to go to Ranger school, and then that's what you would do. So maybe a non-traditional path, because I was fascinated with aviation, military aviation, and certainly enjoyed all the military movies and shows that came out in the '80s that we were all raised on, with Arnold and Sylvester Stallone and all those ones. But I never thought I would actually do it, and probably surprised my parents a little bit, because I was kind of raised, you know, uh, in such a way that it was, okay, go to school. If you can, pay for it, take care of it, you're on your own, work full time, or join the military. And ultimately, that's the path I chose, was the military. And looking back, and I retired almost 8 years ago now. It was a difficult path, but ultimately the most rewarding path for me. And I don't think I would be where I'm at, with my family, certainly, in life, and feeling as successful as I felt. And there's still a lot more to do, but the military was ultimately a really, really good decision for me.
So how long were you a ranger before you finally decided you wanted to give flying a chance?
But I look back to the, what kind of triggered the curiosity about flying. And I remember a specific moment. I think it was my senior year of high school. Growing up in that part of Southern California, where we lived, extremely dry and hot summers, not humid, but just like arid, dry. Everything was dried out. And then you had winter time. There really wasn't a true like spring or fall. It just kind of jumped from one season to the other. So, we always had in that area brush fires. So there was always, the LA County, fire helicopters were always out flying. And I remember it must have been my senior year of high school, and we were in Santa Clarita Valley area, which is kind of going towards the San Fernando Valley area. And I remember being in the car with my mom, and we were going somewhere, and they had this big landing zone set up. The fire department did, and they were landing the helicopters and refueling them and tanking them up with fire retardant or water. And I remember like thinking to myself, and I think I even said it to her, like, "Oh, that'd be cool, someday to figure out how to fly a helicopter." But I had no idea how to do it. But fast forward to being in the Army and Ranger Regiment, extremely difficult, hardest thing I'd ever done at the time, and was surprised I made it all the way through because it was not easy. Every phase of it sucked, but you look back, built a lot of character and really set a solid foundation. But finished, all the training up and jump school and the indoctrination program, and I was tagged to go to Second Ranger Battalion at Fort Lewis, Washington, just outside of Tacoma, Washington. And I arrived in the spring of 1999 as a brand new, you know, airborne ranger infantryman, not yet to ranger school. That would come later. And again, it was just a super fast-paced, crazy environment, but a great place to be raised. Looking back at it, and I was there in Second Ranger Battalion from the spring of 1999 until January of 2002. And again, it was difficult, but I enjoyed it. And it set a really, really good foundation. And I came to a crossroad in my life and career where I had to make a decision. I did an initial enlistment that was 4 years and 17 weeks was the contract. And about a year out is when the reenlistment sergeants start hounding you about what you're going to do. Do you want some college? We'll get you a bonus and this other stuff. I thought to myself, well, I can get out and maybe go back and be a police officer like my father, or do something else, or be a paramedic because I got some great medical training, or try to go into like law enforcement or a firefighter. And I was like, what if I try this program that the Army has where you can go be a warrant officer and go fly? And that was interesting because I'd been flown by the 160th and ridden in the back of their helicopters, and by Air Force Special Operations Command, and they still had their helicopters. So you know, it was kind of like, wow, could I actually go do that someday, be a pilot? And I went through all the preparatory work and took all the exams, and decided I was going to commit myself to that. And instead of re-enlisting, I made the well, assembled the packet and everything I needed, the flight physical, and put all my stuff together and sent it to Fort Rucker. And as a specialist in the Army in E4 with a Ranger tab and some jump wings, thought I was a long shot, but actually had to go back and improve my GT score a little bit, my math that I was so terrible at in high school. But I put the work in, and early September of 2001 got picked up to go to Fort Rucker, Alabama, to go become an Army helicopter pilot. Still surprises me to this day that I was able to do that back then, but it's what happened. So
So you were an E4 when you got selected to
yeah,
go?
I was. Yeah.
Wow. Um, so when you got selected, what was that training like? Get, Getting ready to fly helicopters.
Well, it's interesting because we know there's a major event that happened, right after I got picked up and before I went to Fort Rucker. Obviously, 9/11 happened. So, it was kind of this weird spot to be in, being in Ranger Regiment, which, you're in Ranger Regiment, you're always, training to go to combat. I mean, that's why you exist. You're U.S. Special Operation Command's, premier, assault force, light infantry or airborne infantry, or air assault in that case with the helicopters. So, you'd spent the last few years just always preparing and rehearsing. And mind you, we were on, and when I entered the Army, we're on the backside of what happened, and the collapse of Yugoslavia and the Balkan conflict. So, that was starting to taper off a little bit. But we're in the years before 9/11, where there was a period of transition where we were doing long range patrols and stuff still, but we were also very focused on urban warfare. Just coming out of the type of fighting that happened in the Balkans, and then kind of preparing, not knowing what was going to lie for the next lie ahead of us for the next 2 decades. And 9/11 happened. I still vividly remember waking up or being woken up that morning on the West Coast, being on a West Coast Ranger Battalion, being several hours behind. So very early in the morning, flipping the TV on in the barracks and everybody kind of crowding around the TV, trying to figure out what happened and why there were, two aircraft that hit the towers, the issues at the Pentagon, the other one in Pennsylvania, and what was going on, and USS Cole was the year before, so you're getting all this stuff. You're a young kid still, right? We're in our early 20s, so you don't really process what's going on in the world, but you were always prepared to go do something. So I'd just been picked up for flight school. I was going to report in early, January 20 or 2002 to go to Fort Rucker to go through Warrant Officer Candidate School. So it's kind of hanging in the balance there. Are we now going to go to war? And ultimately the 160th and members of 5th Special Forces Group and other special warfare organizations would late September, early October kick off a campaign in Afghanistan, arriving from the north and from the south, and start what unbeknownst to us what would become a 2-decade long war. And my battalion was not initially sent. Third Ranger Battalion was sent over to Objective Rhino, and they parachuted in, and that kind of started the global war on terror in Afghanistan, right? So I had to go through that that period of like, okay, well, I'm leaving the organization that I've been with for the last few years, the guys that I knew and trained with, and there was a sense of guilt for for a period of time. You're leaving an organization that would ultimately deploy to combat, and you're going to become a pilot. But that sense of guilt went away very quickly when I started deploying as a pilot. And I would fast forward and have over 23 combat rotations. So I would get my fair share of combat experience with about 4.5 years of my 20 years, cumulative time spent in combat flying. So pretty surreal when you look back at it, right?
Yeah. So how long were you flying before you got the selection to soar?
So I showed up in 2002, as I mentioned, and started flight training after making it through the Warrant Officer Candidate School. And for those that don't know, you've got three different rank structures in the Army, and some of the other services have warrant officers too. So you've got your enlisted soldiers, which I was before. You've got warrant officers, kind of in between enlisted and commissioned officers, and you've got commissioned officers. So in the Army, you've got a fairly large community of warrant officers that are predominantly aviation, so pilots. You've got aviation technical warrant officers that are not aviators, and you've got a whole litany of non-flight warrant officer jobs. Everything from intelligence to logistics, air defense, a lot of different warrant officer MOSs. So a warrant officer in the Army is a technical and tactical expert. So they're not enlisted; they capitalize on that enlisted experience that they have, but they don't necessarily have a command responsibility or a career path like a lieutenant colonel or major colonel will have. But in Army aviation, warrant officers constitute most of the helicopter pilots in all of Army aviation, and then certainly in all the flight companies and battalions. Most of the pilots are predominantly warrant officers. So you run flight standardization, aviation maintenance, aircraft survivability, safety. So there are different tracks. But to me, it made a lot of sense to go do that because, well, I wanted to fly and not have to worry about necessarily a command responsibility. But started flying in 2002, and I started off in the Bell 206 trainer, the TH-67, and then transitioned initially to UH-60 Blackhawks and flew those. And I graduated in March of 2003. And next time I touched an Army helicopter was going to my first unit as a pilot, which coincidentally was back to Fort Lewis into a medical evacuation company to do dust off or medevac in Iraq. So I went back to Fort Lewis, signed in, and then shortly thereafter was catching my unit that deployed for the invasion to Iraq as a brand new aviator to go fly dust off during Operation Iraqi Freedom 1. So I would spend the first 11 months of my pilot career in Iraq as a new aviator, learning how to fly. So again, pretty crazy flying medevac in 2003, 2004 in Iraq.
So did you choose the Chinook or was it chosen for you?
Well, the way I got into Chinooks was I mentioned I flew UH-60s, and yeah, I did that rotation in Iraq from 2003 to 2004 flying medevacs. So we would launch, as we said back then, alone and unafraid by ourselves, usually with a grid coordinate, and dump it into the analog cockpit that we had in the GPS and just fly to the point of injury. So we were kind of the 911 call if somebody hit an IED, or had a vehicle roll over, or somebody got shot and they're in a gunfight, called medevac, and we'd come in. We were unarmed, which again, looking back, at that to this day, I would never fly into a gunfight without weapons anymore. But that's what we did. That was the mission: was get to the point of injury as fast as possible. Oftentimes you're landing and there's still chaos everywhere, and you're landing on the highway where there's been an IED strike. We did a lot of missions along the main supply routes between Balad and Baghdad, or Balad to Tikrit. I spent most of my time in Kirkuk and Mosul, mostly in Kirkuk, kind of north central Iraq, just doing that. And did that for a year, and determined that if this is going to be the way it is with two major campaigns going on, in Iraq and Afghanistan, then why not do it with the best resources and the best people and the best team? And for me, being in the normal army wasn't as gratifying as I thought it would be, just because I came from Ranger Regiment and maybe had false assumptions on what the army should be. But I decided that, and mind you, I'm getting ready to get married to my future wife, who's from Northeast Ohio, and is the reason why I'm sitting here in Northeast Ohio talking to you, and why I became a Tribe fan. But about, hey, I just did a deployment for 11 months. We're gonna come back, and we're gonna get married, and I've got two options. We're gonna redeploy again in December, the same unit, and go right back over for another year, or if this is going to be the way it is, I would like to go apply and see if I can get picked up to go assess for the 160th. And that's what I did in the summer of 2004 into the fall. Was put together the packet again, not thinking that I would get picked up. 1 year as a pilot, brand new CW2. One combat rotation, some time in Ranger Regiment, and I thought for sure, I wouldn't even get a chance to go assess for the 160th. Having been on the other side as a Ranger, riding in the back and seeing how good they were, and knowing all the stories, like Mike Durant, who we've talked about before, and his story coming out of Mogadishu, and all the combat. I certainly did not think I was trained or prepared, but I did get approved for an assessment, and in January of exactly 21 years ago, I was going through my assessment right now, to make it to the 160th. And the assessment is it's a brutal week of a lot of sleep deprivation, psychological evaluation, crazy swim test, and some other stuff. And you do some flying. And sure enough, they decided to take a chance on me, and they wanted to assign me to be a special operations Chinook helicopter pilot, and to go to 2nd Battalion 160th at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, where I would spend the rest of my career. So that's how I got into the Chinook. And you know what? It's an amazing aircraft. Got a model right there on the shelf behind me,
I
but
see it.
it's a beast of an aircraft, and that's where I would spend the rest of my Army career, is flying a special operations Chinook helicopter, two different variants. And it's a beast. I love it. It's a great aircraft, and obviously stuff that's happened recently in the news. In South America, it's a very important aircraft to the people that rely on it to get in and get out, and trust it with my life. It's a great machine. So
So the people that don't know anything about the 160th, and admittedly, I'm one of them. I didn't know a
yeah,
lot, but I'll tell you what, the Mike Durant podcast he did, and the Alan Mack I've been
yeah,
listening to on the Sean Ryan, which I am nowhere close to Sean Ryan, but boy, he gets some great conversations.
yeah.
Alan
He sure
Mack was
does.
Alan Mack was talking about his time uh throughout the whole selection process.
Yeah.
In um what was that what kind of people typically physically, mentally are selected to try out to get into that squadron?
Well, it's a process of attrition, right? A lot of people apply and they don't even get the invitation to go assess. Then you have to pass the assessment, and then, passing the assessment means you get you know, the privilege to go into the training pipeline and train. And then you make it through that, then you get assigned to one of the battalions in the one of the flight companies based on what you fly, and you become a basic mission qualified pilot, which means you meet the minimum standard for the 160th to be a co-pilot with a fully mission qualified pilot. And to put it into context, I'd have to look at the hours side by side, but my memory serves me correctly. When you're in the training pipeline in the 160th, you fly more hours in the 160th training pipeline than you do in your primary flight training with the Army. And it's all, you've probably heard from others, probably Al Mack, who is somebody that helped raise me, when I was a young pilot there. Um, it's graduate level flying, and that's a term that's been thrown around quite a bit. And it's stated that way because nobody else in the Army um, operates the way the 160th does. They don't operate the same, aircraft. The capabilities are much different. The mission profiles are much different. The precision that's required is completely different. And it's not saying that the rest of Army aviation is not capable. It's just a different mission. So it's you're going to do the most complex missions with the highest dependency on really tight planning margins or contingency plans, and you're expected to at all times meet certain standards and support your customer, and that customer is whoever's in the back of that helicopter. So it's the discriminators there, the technology, certainly, and the capability of the helicopters, but more importantly, it's the people and just the training. And the guys that fly the attack helicopters there, they're so good because it's repetition, and you get pushed to the point to where you fail, and then you keep pushing through it. And the training pipeline was crazy because you're doing things that nobody else in the Army does, let alone in the U.S. Department of Defense or Department of War, in terms of mission profiles, terrain following, air-to-air refueling. Some of the other services do that, but there are certain nuances that are very different. And it's a pretty wild environment with a bunch of world-class people, and you have a customer that absolutely depends on you to get it right every single time that you fly them and have the privilege of flying them. So it's no easy place. It's a challenging lifestyle, but it is the best of the best.
Yeah, that's what I've learned over this last week leading up to this conversation. Um, did you ever think going through that pipeline that you weren't going to make it?
No, it's people have asked me that before, and I was again in the training pipeline there. I was with other students in the pipeline that had in some cases 7, 8, 9, 10, or 12 years of flying experience more than I had, thousands of hours of experience more than I had. And my mindset going into the 160th and during the training pipeline was, I'm going to do everything they tell me to and teach me to. If they teach me to do it this way, I'm going to do it and embrace that, because I had nothing to fall back on in terms of bad habits. I had one year-long deployment, flying with a lot of different people, but flying medevac wasn't like flying tactically the way the 160th would. So, you know, um, when you go into the 160, they teach you fundamental skills still that are not technology, dependent on technology rather. So if you can imagine, flying your helicopter for a whole month, 5, 6 days a week, where your whole job is to do nothing but navigate with a map and a stopwatch or clock in the helicopter, and that's it. You have no GPS. And they still train to those high standards of, if everything fails, all the technology fails, you can still navigate the aircraft and get it from point A to point B and hit your plus or minus 30-second window. And I had no bad habits or no other training to fall back on other than what little stuff was taught to you at Fort Rucker and flight school. So my mindset was whatever they teach is exactly what I'm going to do. And if I fly with one of the instructor pilots one night and he tells me to do it this way, I'm going to do it that way. And then I'll take that. And when I fly with the other pilot, I'm going to, just, listen to everything he's teaching me or telling me. And that's what really helped me. And that's what I kind of did. And I just embraced, everything that they taught me. And I did struggle towards the end of the training course because, just the way the evaluations went, I had to do a reevaluation to make it out. But that was kind of my MO going into the flight companies and the battalions. There was just, you've got all this incredible experience of people, they've been doing it much longer than me, that had a lot of combat experience. Almac and those guys, being able to fly with, some of the guys that had survived Roberts Ridge, were instructors there. And yeah, those were the guys that really, they pushed you hard during training and it sucked, but you realize why they were doing it, because they had lived through some of those like worst case scenarios or crazy nights or missions, or in some cases being shot down, like Al Mac was and others. And you just have to, learn from their experiences and figure out how you can apply it, because this was 2005, 2006, and there was no shortage of combat waiting for me and the others once we got out of the training pipeline. So, um, yeah, it was not easy, but it was manageable, and that was the best approach I had. Was I'm going to do what they tell me.
Well, Alamac described it as, he said, they don't necessarily try to get you to quit. They
No,
give you all the tools to succeed, and then it's up
yes,
to you. So I thought
yeah,
that was a great explanation of how that was for you guys.
yeah, they sure do. But again, it's being able to manage it. It's a high workload, high stress environment. And there's a hierarchy once you get into the 160th of different qualification levels. So it's very much a pyramid where you start as a basic mission qualified pilot, and then you're expected to become fully mission qualified. But beyond that, to progress to flight lead, like myself and Al Mac and others did, not everybody wants to bear that responsibility of being the person that's going to be the primary planner for complex missions, to lead the helicopter package, to be the primary planner, interfacing with the different customers or different leaders or different tiers of the government, and to have that burden and that responsibility of, it's kind of like the adage, I think in Ranger School, was the platoon leader is responsible for everything the platoon, does or fails to do, whether they did it or not. They're the leader. So it's that accepting that responsibility of the mission, but also what I enjoyed more than anything, being a flight instructor, was the responsibility of training and developing fully mission qualified pilots and flight leads. As I got deeper into my career there, that was the thing I enjoyed the most, was taking all those lessons I had learned, the lessons that others had learned, through the experiences and training, and especially in combat and different scenarios, and just focusing on making really, really qualified, competent, leaders, flight leads. That's probably what I enjoyed the most about being there, as I got deeper into my career, and being a flight standards guy and a battalion senior warrant officer, was training people. Like, that's the best legacy you can leave, is people that are absolutely capable of handling anything that's thrown at them, and doing it well, and bringing themselves and their team back in one piece. So yeah, it's a wild place, but it's a special organization, and always will be for my family and I, for sure.
Nice. So one of the things, Al Mack, I keep referencing back to him because his conversation was so informative. What was the Dunker like for you?
Dunker initially was a bit of a pain. I think a lot of people. I didn't mind the water so much, but I remember the first Dunker I went through, and the friend I mentioned here, if he ever listens to this, will know who I'm talking about. He's a retired colonel now, but we um, we ultimately got our own like super high-end Dunker facility, which made it a heck of a lot easier and more realistic. But until we had that capability in the later down the road, you had to go to like Naval Air Station Jacksonville or Groton, Connecticut, or these other places, and do the Navy Dunker, which was kind of generic. And again, it's just it sucks. You got to get used to water, going up your sinuses when you're upside down underwater. And it was like a giant being like inside of a giant like soda can just tossed in the water and flipped over, and everybody's trying to scramble to get out of it. But Dunker wasn't bad once we got our own facility with the 160th, which was very, very specific. They have exact like replicas of the cockpit for the Chinook and the crew stations for the Chinook and the Black Hawk and the Little Bird. And yeah, they turn on this little like ball device that like circulates the water and makes the water choppy. And then they have fans that blow water on you, like from the ski resorts that do the snowmaking, and they just hammer you with all these different conditions and get you upside down. But like survival training, like the survival, the SEER course, Dunker, it's to me, it's only as good as the training. And if you embrace what they teach you, then it becomes a lot less painful. So you just kind of accept the fact that you're going to have water running out of your nose for a few days in your sinuses after being upside down. But it's like with everything, they get you past that fear of being upside down, strapped in with a compressed air bottle on you, to you've got your visor down, the lights are out, and you're safely egressing the helicopter. And it really is life-saving training. I mean, there's all kinds of examples of guys, little birds or other aircraft that would not, be alive today had it not been for that training where they actually crashed into the water. And in some cases, the open ocean in that training is what saved their lives. Just that awareness of, okay, I'm going to hit the water. Here's what I do. Fundamentals of, egressing a helicopter, activating your flotation device, that stuff will save your life. So you have to, do exactly what the instructors do and what they teach you. And, it does make a difference. So it sucks, but they can make the suck a little more comfortable for you.
Well, we had a term in the military that we all used: embrace the suck.
You have to.
Yep,
In that case, it's you just need to realize that it sucks and everybody else is there with you in the suck, but it's only temporary, so it's not
right.
permanent.
So, how did you find out making it through the pipeline? How did they tell you that you made it?
Well, mine was
Was that
interesting.
stressful or
Yeah, it was stressful because I had mentioned earlier I had to do like a reevaluation for my final check ride, and it was just a miscommunication between the check pilots and the scenario and stuff. So mine was probably a little unorthodox because they knew the flight company I was going to go to. They were actually working with First Ranger Battalion at the time, and they were in Dahlonega, Georgia, and they were doing some profiles in the mountains there. Dahlonega, Georgia is where the mountain phase of Ranger School is, coincidentally. And my one of my targets to go fly to and navigate to was there's a big landing strip in the woods there, and I'm like, okay, I know exactly where this is because I went to Ranger School there. And they told me pack a bag because if you're good, if you pass, we're going to tell you to get off the helicopter and join your new unit on an exercise. Which, as I understand to this day, they weren't supposed to do that. And I think the instructor that did the evaluation that night probably got into some trouble because it wasn't officially like transferred to the new flight company. But that's where it was, and yeah, I still remember it vividly because the pilot that drove out to pick me up was a gentleman named John Quinlan, who became a great friend of mine. I flew a lot with him, and he would end up dying shortly thereafter in a helicopter crash in 2007. But yeah, it was a bit of an unorthodox, chaotic sequence of events when I started my career there. And then about a month later, I would go on my first deployment to Afghanistan on the 160th. There in May of 2006 for that whole entire summer, and really start to learn how to fly, but more importantly, learn the stuff that I needed to focus on as a brand new pilot in that environment.
what kind of missions did you fly in that first deployment?
Well, it was busy. We were, you know, we had a small force there of mostly my company, and this was before it became much larger in terms of footprint over there. We had people in Iraq still too, so um, with only three or four special operations Chinooks in country at this stage, we were kind of all over the place. So it wasn't uncommon to to have to do really really long transit legs to fly down to the south and do missions. So it was a very nomadic lifestyle that whole summer of kind of bouncing all over the country and doing different missions with different customers, whether it was the Rangers or the SEALs or working with Special Forces ODAs, kind of at remote outstations. So a lot of really really dark flying, no moon, and just learning how to use the tools for real, on the aircraft, and fly with a bunch of different instructors and do some pretty chaotic missions right out the gate. I still remember one of the first missions I did was a pretty wild mission along the Pakistani border with a lot of kinetic activity, big bombs being dropped, and just flying into very challenging environments and terrain. And but flying with a very 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 great instructor who I mentioned earlier, John Quinlan, kind of showing me the ropes, and also some great crew members in the back, and learning just how important the crew is, especially in the Chinook. You've got four crew chiefs in the back. How important the crew dynamic is, and when it comes to getting the mission done. So
Well,
yeah, it was
you
well.
guys oh, sorry. Yeah,
No,
you guys,
it was well.
obviously, Night Stalkers. What's it like flying with those night vision goggles on?
Well, as you know, we've talked. I still fly, civil helicopters for part of my work duties, and flown airplanes, since retiring, to include at night. And you got so used to flying with night vision goggles that you feel naked when you don't fly with them because you can see everything. But when it's really really dark out, you still can't see much, and you rely on the systems on the aircraft. But it's yeah, I always thought, flying with night vision goggles was going to be challenging, intimidating. I'd worn ground night vision, goggles being in Ranger Regiment, certainly. But that's what's crazy is I look back and realize that I was now doing, the things that, others were doing for me, when I was in Ranger Regiment, and had a greater appreciation for how hard the job is now being a pilot, compared to being a passenger in the back. You're pretty oblivious to everything that's going on up front. But yeah, you do it pretty much almost exclusively. Those years we flew pretty much only at nighttime. Very rarely would we do some stuff in the daytime. And you just got really comfortable with it that it became second nature. So to this day, I feel naked flying at nighttime without night vision goggles. So
Hey, if you ever need a passenger when you're flying around Cleveland, let me know. I'm available.
yeah, I gotta get back into flying airplanes up here. So I'll probably pick that up here maybe this year. I think is my goal is to get back into an airplane. I haven't flown airplanes in a little while because I've been back flying civil helicopters, which is completely different and far simpler than Army aviation. But yeah, for sure, we'll try to get you up.
So what was the relationship like between pilot and crew chief?
The most successful relationships are the ones where the pilots, in my opinion, acknowledge the importance of the crew chief, but also embrace and insulate the crew chief as a critical member of the team. And I think I speak for almost probably all the pilots in the 160th that rely on crew chiefs, that they're your extra set of eyes in the back. Chinook is a massive helicopter, and when if you can imagine coming into land in the dust and you lose, everybody wants to be visual, right? We like to fly visually and we like to see things. So you can imagine coming in and you're going to land and it's dark out and you lose all your visual references and you can't see anything. Well, you got four sets of eyes in the back that can pick up the calls for you and really help you, get the aircraft down safely. So, on top of that, when things go sideways, those are the guys and gals in the back that are going to be shooting for you. So, to me, it's you got to support their training. They're teammates, and in the end, they will truly save the life of the crew because of what they see back there. And it's to me is a great relationship. You get very close, especially when you're on deployments together, working with the same crew. And there are some extremely talented crew chiefs and flight engineers out there that I love to death. And I would say a lot of us pilots are alive today because of their ability to, sense things going wrong, or, make the decisive decision to, engage, neutralize enemy threats, and full faith and confidence in those crew chiefs and flight engineers. I mean, we couldn't do our job without them ever, and they're so important to getting the job done.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to ask that so I can acknowledge those guys because from what
Yeah.
I heard, they are exactly
Oh
what
yeah.
you said.
They know
S-
that aircraft. That's their assigned helicopter, so they know those airplanes better than anybody else. They know all the quirks, and like I said, it's kind of flying by committee. You know, you may be the pilot in command, but those crew chiefs in the back have a voice for sure.
And you had was it common to have the same crew chief for a long time?
Yeah, I mean, you're in the companies together. That's the beauty of the 160th and really special operations. That's different than most of the military is that you're not like PCSing or changing duty station every few years. So, like, I was in the same battalion from 2006 until I retired in 2018. So, I got to see a lot of those crew chiefs and flight engineers, grow up, from E3s, E4s, E5s, E6s to E7s, E8s, E9s, no different than they got to watch me grow up from, CW2 to 3 to 4
Mhm.
and progress through my career. And they're progressing through their career too. So you get very, very close with your crew members. And uh, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of deployments flying with the same crew chiefs throughout the years in various roles as they progress. And working with them, it becomes very much like a family type relationship for sure.
So some of your customers were the most elite operators in the
100%.
military. How much trust was there between all of you guys when you were taking them to a landing zone? I'm guessing there was a lot.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, we exist. The 160th exists because of those customers. You look at the history of the 160th is rooted in failure, right? And it goes back to the Iranian hostage crisis and the attempt to rescue the hostages with a failed desert refueling and rendezvous site, and the U.S. acknowledging that there wasn't a full capability set. So that created and birthed from the 101st Airborne Division, the 160th, to specialize in complex missions, flying at night, and then being able to support the special operations customers to really guarantee them mission success. With the air crews in the 160th, you can either be the strongest link in the chain of events or the weakest link, and we never wanted to be the reason why the mission was failure. We always wanted to make sure that we were driving the success of the mission and working with the supported ground customers, whether it's Rangers, SEALs, Special Forces, Delta Force, NATO. I have a lot of time working with NATO Special Operations Forces too, as you mentioned at the beginning, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Poland. I've got coins behind me, from the Norwegian FSK and the Polish Grom, who are extremely competent and capable special operators that we did missions with in Afghanistan too. So, for us, it didn't matter who was in the back of the helicopter; they got the same support, whether it was infantry soldier from the 82nd or a NATO SOF or Delta Force. That's why we existed, and we recognize that's why we exist is to give them world class aviation support, but really to be their safety net when it came down to contingencies when things go sideways. They knew that they could rely on us to support them and accomplish the mission or get wounded people off target or adapt to the dynamic elements of any special operations mission because you have a things change. The enemy has a vote. Weather changes, conditions change, and there was mutual trust that we would get them where they needed to go, and then they would accomplish the mission, and we would get them back out. So,
Well, for the average listener, what's the difference between an MH-47 and a regular Chinook?
well, I mean, the
Without
obvious
without getting into the
diff-
top secret stuff.
Yeah, well, the obvious differences are the color is black. It's matte black for obvious reasons, flying at night, and you've got a lot more stuff hanging off the helicopter. To include the ability to do in-flight refueling, which is the 160 is the only organization in the Army that does that, and that gives you almost unlimited range to be able to fly, extremely long distances and provide all kinds of contingency support. But then it's other technologies that allow you to operate, excuse me, in very, very complex environments where conventional aviation can't or shouldn't operate. So you've got a whole litany of different sensors on board the aircraft for different operational environments, whether it's flying in obscuration when you can't see the ground and getting, from point A to point B and back with your customer, or you look at the contemporary stuff from earlier this month of flying into contested areas or contested airspace and getting in and getting out successfully. So it's the technology is a huge part of it. The capability of the aircraft is a lot different than a normal Chinook, but it all boils down to the crews and the training that they have to do those missions. That's the biggest difference maker is they know how to use the tools in the right way to get the job done.
So, how much does weather play a factor in a mission?
It's always a factor. It can be the go no go factor for the whole mission. You can plan for months and months, and have your plans halted because of weather conditions and clouds, snow. I mean, helicopters and icing do not mix at all. So you fly it, you go to Cleveland Hopkins and you get de-iced on your airplane and you fly to Atlanta, no problem. Yeah, helicopters with all the surfaces and icing don't mix. So yeah, weather is always a driving factor for a number of reasons. But we flew in some pretty nasty weather, and nowadays I prefer to fly in just absolute clear skies and no clouds. So I've paid my dues flying in nasty weather in the past. Can you do it? Yes. You just have to make sure that the mission and the risk is worth it. And there are cases where it was certainly, and the aircraft has capabilities for that. But it just depends on what the nature of the mission is and what needs to be accomplished.
Well, what's the most challenging landing zone you ever went into?
We talked about a few. We met for coffee the other day, and I was, thinking the other night that I still remember one mission where you're talking about weather. It's a good lead in that we had to get U.S. forces in and back out, and this was in central Afghanistan in 2010, and we couldn't see anything. It was in the summertime, and it was rare to have low ceilings and rain in the summertime, but it was welcome to keep the dust down. And there was a case where there were some U.S. Casualties. In this case, I think there were two Navy sailors that had succumbed to injuries in a gunfight or something, and we were going out trying to recover them. And we couldn't see anything, and the weather was terrible, terrain all around us, and we had to take off, separated by time. And we were using the systems on the aircraft, but the rain was so severe that the radar wasn't working correctly. So we had to just separate by time, fly a route, and basically come in and hover over coordinates when you couldn't see the ground below you, and then just hover all the way down. And we had 70, 80 foot trees all around us. And we came in and just used the systems on the helicopter. Can't see anything. It's raining. And got to the coordinates, 100 feet in the air, and just slowly brought the aircraft down. And we got about 30, 40 feet off. The guys in the back said they could see the special operators in the ground. We landed, loaded them back up, and then did the opposite, came out, and then just flew the route at a set altitude. Again, not being able to see anything until we got back to the forward operating base. And that was one of those nights where it was just everything was quiet, but everybody was calm and in control and doing their job. And was the perfect example of trusting the guys in the back to help you do what you need to do, but also trusting your planning and the actions of the other helicopters in your flight. We were able to successfully get our guys off the ground and back. So
Nice. Did your flying style change you when you got married and became a dad?
yeah, I think it was always kind of conservative but aggressive when it needs to be. But being a husband, I was married before I went to the 160th, so that was always in the back of my mind of okay, a lot of prayers before every mission because became a Catholic as an adult, and I still to this day do every time I fly. But yeah, certainly being a father, it changes. A father and a husband, it changes the level of risk you're willing to take, not just in military flying, but civil flying too. But you have to find the balance, right? If you're in combat and the mission dictates, you're not going to take unnecessary risk, but if you've got other Americans on the ground and they're in a gunfight under duress and they need to be supported absolutely, then we're not going to let something happen to them. So it's this weird dynamic of yes, yes, and no, if that makes sense, because it didn't change the level of support or the lengths I would go to support somebody in the ground that needed immediate assistance. I would always, no matter what, come in and get them.
Nice. When you were coming into a hot LZ, what's going through your mind for something like that?
Those are always interesting because sometimes you would get tipped off on the way in that they could hear you and they started shooting in the air well before you got there. And it was at that point all about utilizing all the different resources flying above you that can see things to try to identify what's going on, and then having, in some cases, some flexibility to adjust plans in the fly and make audible calls like a football quarterback would. We had done that in the past if the situation dictated it, but if the you know you get shot at, sometimes you get shot at. That's where we go back to the crew members in the back. That it's teamwork, and there's a lot of stuff going on the radios, and you just it's well coordinated, well orchestrated responses at that point to manage what's going on. It's you get shot up or banged up sometimes, but you have to just trust your training, trust the crew in the back, and just make sure everybody knows what's going on and is able to respond. And you got to get your guys on the ground out of the helicopter, and you got to get out of there. So
Right. Clint Romeshay, Medal of Honor recipient, in his book Red Platoon, he talked about the respect he has for you guys, and he described you as the guys who fly into danger without hesitation, nerves of steel, flying into chaos to get wounded soldiers out and to get your
yeah,
job done. I mean, you got to love that kind of respect that you guys get from the guys on the ground.
yeah. I mean that's like a 5-star review in Google for us, right? I mean that's why we exist. So we took it personally. The organization takes it personally that that's why they exist, because you have a customer that relies on that level of support. So that's the job, and that's what you sign up for. And you know most people recognize that when they sign up to go to that organization, that's what they came to do. So be part of the best and work with the best customers and do the most complex missions that others can't, and to do it well and come back. So yeah, it's always great to hear that, and we feel the same way about those customers too. They're the best of the
Mhm.
best. So that's our satisfaction, is giving them world class support.
Well, I sent a text message to my friend Leroy Petrie. Leroy Petrie got the Medal
Oh
of
yeah,
Honor in Afghanistan, and I asked him if he would want me to say anything to you, and he said just tell him he would I wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for you guys. So
yeah.
he
He's got
appreciates you.
quite a story. So
Mhm.
again, it's why we exist. It's what we do, and it's what we're passionate about, is supporting that customer. So.
Well, without getting into anything sensitive, is there a mission that sticks out with you all these years later?
Well, you mentioned one night in Pakistan was something that happened in 2011, and that one is certainly one that will always stick out in my memory for obvious reasons. And it wasn't so much about the mission or the chaos of that night as it was about that's one side of the story, but it was about the just the level of preparedness to go into a mission that complex and that critical, and just the months and months of training and repetition, and just the preparedness, at different locations all across the country. When it came time to go execute a mission in 2011 to get the world's number one terrorist, that I think we all collectively felt absolutely prepared to do it. And even when things went sideways, as they did a little bit on the beginning of the mission, we felt absolutely prepared to handle the contingency that happened right away. So it's doing a mission, doing missions that were routine missions for us in Afghanistan. Supporting the Rangers or SEALs or Delta or other special forces groups or NATO SOF, like those are all dangerous missions too. There was always, some level of chaos that would show up on those missions too, because again, the enemy has a vote. But that particular night you mentioned, went sideways with a crashed helicopter, and what now? So, I was just, I think back to that night, my role in such a mission of, cleaning up, helping to clean up and recover the mess and get everybody back. And, just what my crew did, and just the challenge and the burden and the pressure, that they will forever be rock stars in my heart and my mind, because everybody did their mission despite the chaos follows through that night. And in the end, yes, you had uh, a complexity in the beginning of the mission, but in the end, everybody came back alive. And that's what's the most important thing to me. And everybody did their job exactly as they trained for months and months, to a T. And you can't ask for anything more than that, right?
Yep.
So,
So when we met for coffee the other day, and I asked you about this, and the first thing you said to me was you don't want your entire career to be defined by one mission.
right.
This is a pretty big mission, and Operation Neptune Spear. How long did you guys plan for this?
I mean, I know been going on for some time, and it's just kind of, to me, it's one of those ones you were always planning for, right? So I
Right.
wasn't privy to the highest levels of planning in the U.S. government, but um, for that particular night, it's months and months of planning, right? And
Wow.
it's it manifests in somebody saying, yes, we're going to go do it and go try. But to me, it's one of those cases where we could argue that it was 10 years of planning, right? If you look back from, in the probably longer than that, certainly if you trace back to, the original World Trade Center bombing, what, 1993, and the embassy attacks in Kenya and elsewhere. So it's, you could argue that it was, decades of planning to try to get, one person and diminish, a network. But my piece of it was just, my frame of reference was, being in the regiment at that time, and then just the months building up to it. So it's what we do. To me, it was textbook, stuff, right? Something's coming up, you have the time and resources to prepare for it, and that's what you did. You went out and trained and got comfortable in the different environments and scenarios. So as I mentioned before, I didn't feel unprepared at all. I felt very well prepared, and I'm certain everybody else did. And you know, again, it came down to the leadership of the country saying, "Okay, we feel confident enough to go do it. And it's worth the risk, and let's go do it." And again, it was in the end a successful mission, not without challenges, but there are a lot of lessons learned. And as we know, and what's happened in the last few weeks, is that the organization is still absolutely capable of going out and doing missions that are, arguably even more dangerous than the ones before them. So yeah, I don't view things like that as defining my career, because as I mentioned earlier, my successful career, definition, or defining moment is just leaving a legacy of very well trained people behind me. And knowing that some of the folks that I trained and helped raise, that still participate in missions to this day, to me is the most gratifying thing, is that they are still capable of doing it. They feel well prepared and trained, and that I did my job as a trainer for them in my career. And to me, that's the most satisfying part of my career, was leaving that legacy behind of doing everything I could conceivably do to make sure that anybody that went after me was as prepared as possible to handle what was ever thrown at them.
Well, I'm a history nerd, and this is a pretty historically important thing that you guys did. Uh, Speaking of Sean Ryan again,
Yeah.
Matt Bissonnette and Rob O'Neill went into great detail about this. They were obviously in SEAL Team 6, and if anybody hasn't caught on by now, you were part of the Bin Laden raid, and the Rob O'Neill. I don't know how much you can say about those Blackhawks, but Rob O'Neill said that those things were like transformers. They'd never seen anything like that before. When you first saw those Blackhawks, I mean, what did you think of those?
I mean,
Because
it's a
I
unique
because I heard,
capability.
and I don't know if it's true, but they had to be taught how to fly those things.
Yeah, I mean, it's a unique capability, and I don't want to go into much more detail than
Hmm.
that, but it's just knowing that we have the capability and really just the talent. It's not just the pilots that fly them, but I work in aerospace and defense now. It's knowing that you have very, very talented engineers or test pilots that are willing to come up with those ideas and then test them. To me, that's how you keep adversaries at bay, is you're unpredictable, right? So the fact that we have technology like that, and again, technology is only as good as the operators that know how to
Hmm.
employ it. um you know it's it's fascinating. It's sexy stuff because it's you don't know about it, and
Right.
and to me it needs to stay that way. So
I
because
agree.
again, being unpredictable is how you can keep your adversary at bay. And I am happy that there are still people and organizations and things out there that are being pushed to the envelope, and in aerospace and defense. And that makes me happy that we have the ability and resources to still do things like that. And you know truly, like, take things past the art of the possible and into almost another dimension of capability that's unfathomable in many cases. So
Hmm. Well, Rob O'Neill said they were going into this thinking it was a suicide mission. And even after they did what they did in the compound, he said we still had 90 more minutes to fly out of there. And
yeah.
you guys did what you needed to do. Did the mood change when you had to have heard over your headset that Blackhawk went down? Did the mood change, or what
Yeah, I
went
mean,
through your mind?
again, I mentioned before, you're trained for all these different contingencies. So
Hmm.
the mood changes, but the focus doesn't, right? Because you're prepared to get the job done no matter what. So it's just understanding the magnitude of what's happened. And yeah, it's nobody wants to hear about something like that happen. But the first thought immediately was, okay, is everybody okay? That's priority one. Is everybody okay? And once we learned that everybody was okay, then that kind of takes that pressure off. And now it's okay. What do we need to do to get the job done? Because now it's a contingency, right? It's a full blown contingency. So um, that initial shock of, okay, stuff went sideways. What are we going to do? Okay, everybody's okay. Like, I think most of us think the same way. Once you realize that everybody's fine, nobody's injured, then okay, let's figure out what we need to do to accomplish the mission as it was planned. Get the rest of the job done, and then get out of there. So you immediately start jumping to the, okay, well, what do we need to do to get everybody back home safe at this stage? So at that point, it's a simple math problem, right? You bring X helicopters in with X number of people, and now you've got one less helicopter, same number of people. What do you do now? So it's a math problem, and it's a math problem that would impact me directly later in the evening, and something we had to put into our calculus of, okay, we've got so much fuel, so much additional weight. We got to get all the resources back, and just doing the math problem and making sure that everything that we had planned in great detail is accurate, and just trusting that the plan that you launched with and the contingencies you had in your mind were actually doable. Now they were about to be tested for real. So you got to really see if your planning and your contingency planning was verified by doing it for real. And that's what we certainly did that night. And in the end, it all worked out. Everybody got back home safe.
So I read, I don't know if this is true. I guess you could tell me, but was one of the helicopters engaged by an F-16?
Uh, I don't remember that happening specifically, but that was always kind of a potential threat in the back of the mind of, okay, you're in some other country, and okay, you just did this big mission and stirred up the hornet's nest a little bit. So um, I wouldn't say directly, but it was, more of a, okay, maybe this could happen, but let's make sure it doesn't happen and let's get out of here. So,
Mhm.
but again, training and rehearsals, help mitigate that. And I'm certain there were some other diplomatic plans kind of in the back pocket of those in DC if it got to that point. But yeah, I think you had, there was always the threat of that. But whether it would manifest or not, that's probably a different discussion for a different day. But at that point, it was one thing I was monitoring, but again, my focus was okay. Let's get everything cleaned up, everybody accounted for, and let's get out of here. Right? Let's get everybody back home. So
So when you made it, when you knew everybody was safe and you were in the clear, what was the mood like on the helicopter? The SEAL Team 6 in the back, were
it
they
was,
quiet? Were they celebratory? Because you guys just
yeah,
changed history.
yeah. It was interesting because we shut the aircraft down. And the sun's coming up, and I think we just kind of remember getting off the helicopter, just kind of standing and looking around, and everybody kind of felt the same way. Like, wow, what did we just do? This is crazy. And you go in to the rooms there and you flip the TV on, and it's already making its way across the news back home. And for me, that's when it really hit. The magnitude of that, and being part of such a prominent mission. So it's very surreal. When you do missions like that, there are a lot of other missions we did that were prominent missions too throughout the years.
Mhm.
Not necessarily me, but the organization. The organization doesn't take on normally any small tasks, but when you do these big critical missions, yeah, I think people, as you get older, realize maybe how impactful or important the mission was. But at the time, it's like, okay, we made it through that. What's next? So you're still in the midst of you know combat in Iraq and combat in Afghanistan, and the potential for activities to happen elsewhere. So um, yeah, it's surreal, but at the same time, you're kind of like, okay, we did it. So uh, what happens next? What changes next? And I think afterwards, you just kind of settle back into your groove. But yeah, for a period of time there, it was like, wow. This was pretty wild, and I think I realized that more as I get older. But at the same time, it's it won't be the first. It wasn't the first, and it certainly won't be the last. Type of mission of that magnitude, as we both well know. So,
Yeah. So what'd you think of Zero Dark 30? Did they get it right?
uh, I'm not going to comment on that. So, I have my own personal feelings in that one. But you got to sensationalize some stuff for Hollywood. But
Mm.
uh, I would say it's okay. I'll just leave it at that. So.
And did you once you guys got back, did you see the target? Or the
Uh,
whatever he's called, whatever it
yeah.
was.
Yeah, not for me, no. I was
Okay.
focused on other stuff at that point. So,
So what about the Edward Byers? He got the Medal of Honor, and
yeah.
you flew that mission. What do you remember of that mission?
Well, it's like I talked about, that you go from one prominent mission to another, and that was a extremely complex mission night in 2012. And he got the Medal of Honor, and Nick Check got the Navy Cross. Although Nick unfortunately perished on during the mission. But it's the level of commitment from the team doesn't change. It was a difficult mission where there was a Doctors Without Borders physician who had been captured and was being held hostage, and for a number of days you know we were wanting to locate him so we could recover him alive. And that mission that night was a complex insertion, very dark. Had to kind of fly in and fly our way out a very specific way and not compromise the objective, and get the SEALs on the ground so they could do a movement to get to where the doctor was at. And he certainly was there, but Nick Check was shot pretty quickly during the mission, and Ed Byers certainly continued to fight and save the American hostage and neutralize the threats. But now you've got a SEAL that's gravely injured on the objective. And I remember coming in and having to make a decision to bring my wingman in and actually land him in the only place to land while I drew cover for him and drew fire out of a village further down in the valley, while also coordinating all the airspace to get to Bagram as quickly as possible so that we could just fly direct there as fast as possible, knowing that Nick Check was being tended to, although the outlook was grave. And they took care of him the whole way to the medical center, about 40 minutes, despite his fatal injuries, more or less. And we flew the guts out of the helicopters to get them there, just because we felt there was a chance still to save his life, even if it was the slimmest margin, and that's what we did. So you know you do big complex missions or you do these smaller missions. And I wouldn't say small magnitude or importance, but just the scope of the resources involved. And it doesn't change the level of dedication or commitment by the team. That's
Right.
why we exist, is to support that customer. And we'll do everything to include almost breaking both our helicopters to try to save another American's life. And that's what we did that night. I'm very proud of what my crews did that night. And that's why we exist, because we're willing to do that for our supported customer, even if there's the slightest chance.
Right. Did you ever have a go-to song that you played going in going on your flights or anything? Hollywood always they seem to love helicopter pilots and playing loud
Yeah,
music in there. Do you do
yeah.
anything like that?
I would say in later deployments, we towards the end of my rotations over there, that we would drive these Toyota Hilux trucks out to the aircraft on a mission night once everything was planned, and we would just for some reason have whatever was on the radio in there through like Armed Forces Network, and it always seemed to be like electronic dance music or something. So you're just kind of hauling ass to get to the helicopters to get ready to go pick up the customer and just so. But like I said, I'm the generation kind of straddle the the Gen X and millennial generation. So I had some guys older than me who were more into the classic rock, and then me, and then some guys younger than me that were more into EDM and other stuff too. So it was a fun group of people to work with, for sure. We made the
Sounds like
most
it.
out of deployments. So deployments are challenging and can suck, but they're if you're with good people that you trust and you have fun with, then they're not that bad. It made it much more easier to be on deployments when you were surrounded by good people. So
Did your job affect your sleep at all?
it still
Aside
does to
from
this
working at
day.
night.
Yeah, it still does to this day, because you're so used to being operating at night. So yeah, I still think I struggle to sleep well to this day, because I was so used to 14-hour days in deployment. You're going to bed when the sun's already up, and then going to work when the sun's getting ready to go down. So yeah, it does mess with you. The time zone change wasn't so bad, because it actually, you're in the Middle East, the time zone change is about the same as the US. So but yeah, kind of being a night owl by design does mess you up a little bit. So
Did you ever have any and I'm sure the answer is yes, but did you ever have any times you didn't think you were going to make it back?
that's a I've had people ask me that question before, and I would say, there are times where it was very dangerous, but I never thought that way. You know what I mean? Like that thought never crossed my mind that I wasn't going to come back. So I never felt that way, thought that way.
Hmm.
It was always about, gonna get through the deployment, get it done, come home, get ready for the next one, and just work hard to do well and take care of the team and take care of each other. So like for me, I never, the people I worked with, a level of trust was there that, yeah, it was dangerous and there's always the risk, but I never, that thought, honestly, never formally crossed my mind, because I didn't feel that way. I didn't think that way. Even if I knew the mission was going to be sporty or dicey, it's like, we'll get through it, we'll figure it out.
So what was harder, leaving the military or leaving the 160th?
Well, I did both at the same time, right? So,
Right.
um, for me, the military was, I spent most of my career in special operations, almost all of it, minus, flight school and, a year and a half in a medevac company. I was in Ranger Regiment, then went to flight school, medevac, and then the rest of it was back in a special operations unit. So, it's I was around people that have known now for over 20 years. And, that's the hardest part about leaving is I have lifelong friends who I've done dangerous stuff with, and you've got this bond, through those crazy, challenging, dangerous times. That's in many cases it's an unbreakable bond, right? And I know a lot of the guys feel the same way. And the neat part about that is I run into guys still all the time, or I stay in touch with the guys. And these are people I've not physically seen in many cases in 6, 7, 8 years, maybe longer. I've been retired 8 years now almost. But it's almost like there's no gap in time when you see each other, because you were just so used to, and things change. People go through different stages of life, or different things happen, health, family, etc. But in the end, like, it doesn't change the relationship necessarily. Like, I can pick up with friends I haven't seen in 5, 5, 6, 7 years. Like, like I was talking to them yesterday, and it's for that reason that, like, those friendships. I tell people, like, there's people I could call tonight that are 500 miles away at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and they would be here 8 hours later if I needed them to show up here, and I would do the same for them. And that's probably the biggest difference, between the private sector, the corporate world, and coming from that environment is, just the level of trust you have, loyalty with, your people. It's like an extended family. It really is. So, those are the things I miss the most, or being around the people. Like, again, there's amazing people there that trained me, people that I raised that are doing amazing things. So that's probably the most special part about it.
Do you miss the adrenaline rush?
It's flying that helicopter. The MH is special. So, I still know, off of memory how to start it. Just going through the checklist. So, I remember most of the steps. I might need help on a few others, but yeah, I do miss the experience of, as we would say, strapping the helicopter on. Jumping in the seat and firing it up and going and doing your job. So it's a unique experience that very very few people in this world will ever get to experience. Of starting a 160th helicopter and going out on a critical 160th mission with the best customers in the world in the back. So it's very special. So I miss that side of it, but in the end, you can't do it forever, and you have to accept that all good things come to an end like that, and you just have to be proud that you were part of that organization and part of its history, and you'll forever be associated with it, no matter what happens in your life. You'll always be a Night Stalker. So
Well, how did flying in combat change how you look at life, or did it?
it has certainly, it, and this is something I'm working on to this day. For my wife and for my daughter, my family, is just combat's so fast paced that I find myself struggling to this day just to try to slow my brain down and turn things off. And I talk to a lot of guys that are going through the retirement process right now too. That don't look for what you had there, because it doesn't necessarily exist out here. In society. We talk about the things we did a few moments ago about loyalty and just what people are willing to do for each other. And again, I'm not marginalizing anybody out there and their relationships they have, friends, family, etc. But it's I would argue it doesn't exist the same way that it does. And for me, it's just trying to still to this day slow my mind down and my brain down of the anxiety of something happening, because you live that lifestyle, and it's very much a lifestyle of, your phone could go off and 2 hours later you could be, at work getting ready to go somewhere in the world for who knows how long. So, shedding that, kind of that anxiety of what's going to happen next is something that I admittedly still struggle with. I always kind of feel like, okay, like on edge a little bit. And it's something that I'm going to have to probably manage for the rest of my life. And I'm sure others will too. And something my family certainly has to manage too, is because again, there's my side of it, and then there's the other side of my wife, having to raise our daughter by herself, and sit there and wait, for 30 days for a deployment to come and go, or 60 days. So for me it could be, you know flying 2 or 3 nights in a row of crazy dangerous missions, then you're on a weather hold for 2 or 3 days, and you're playing video games and just going to the gym. But to the families, it doesn't matter. You're still in combat. You're gone. So it's it's not just me. It's a family, challenge that we're going to have for the rest of our lives of trying to mitigate that. I don't think we'll ever be able to completely, purge it from our systems, but the best you can do is try to mitigate it and manage it and realize that that was the past. We lived through that, we survived it. How do we slow things down and try to not worry so much about that? And I'm sure a lot of veterans go through that too. Just especially those that spend a lot of time in combat, not just special operations, but there's a lot of guys and gals out there that were in the conventional military that did 4, 5, 6 year long deployments, over the course of 10 or 15 years. I can't imagine how difficult that is to adapt to a normal lifestyle after being home for a year, deployed for a year, home for a year, gone for 15 months, or imagine for the Navy, if you did 6 month float, home for 6 months, 6 month float, home for 6 months. It's just that's a difficult lifestyle to maintain. And there'll be a lot of residuals like that that you just have to manage over time. So I always tell people, try to get help if you can. Don't be shy about it, and there's no shame in asking for help. It's something that I still struggle to this day that I need to work on more, admittedly. So,
So, uh, what does service mean to you now?
uh, when I first joined, and when you first joined the military, it probably meant something different. Probably meant, well, I need to do something with my life and, not necessarily escape, but change something to become something. I think that's what it was when I first joined the military. Was I needed to do something, not necessarily to identify with something, but I needed to change something so that I could do something or become something. And that was a logical pathway that helped shape the rest of my life and still does. And as I look back and reflect on service, to me, it's about, I don't want it to sound cliche because I know a lot of veterans feel this way, but it's about being part of something bigger than oneself. Being part of something that could, change ideally the world in a better way. Being, passionate about your country and its people, and the protections they have, the constitutional rights they have. Whether you agree with them or not doesn't matter. You still are willing to stand up for everything right, wrong, or indifferent that's permitted by the free will that you have of living in this country, right? So, that's what service has transitioned to for me, is that, in the end, I, realized that what I did was to, support and defend the Constitution of the United States, all the normal stuff. But in the end, it's to really serve my country, be a part of something bigger than oneself, but to ensure that, whether I agree with things or disagree, that people still have the right to do what they are allowed to do as citizens of this country. And they should always have that right. Whether people agree with it or not doesn't matter. It's the right that we are giving them and supporting, by being in the military. And just it becomes, very micro. And then as you get older and mature, you realize, the provenance of what it should be, in my opinion, right? If that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree 100%. So, looking back on your whole career, what are you most proud of? And it sounds like your previous answer to my last question is probably what you're most proud of. But of all the things you did,
Yeah.
what are you most proud of?
Well, I mean, it's the military is a proud point, book. It's not even a chapter; it's a whole book. But really, being a dad, and a husband that's the one thing I would not trade for anything. And it's the most rewarding. Can be the most complex, most difficult.
Hmm.
But in the end, it's the one thing worth fighting for every single day is my family. And like I said earlier, on the military side, it's just being able to get to the point to where I was able to give back and, train and develop others. Like, to me, that's the best legacy you can leave, is, building people better than you were. That's how you build leaders, is, teaching them everything that you know and tailoring it for them and making them into the best version of themselves through your own lessons learned, through the organization's lessons learned. And that's the best legacy, is, talking to people that, are are out there doing their job to this day, doing the deed to this day.
Mhm.
And telling somebody like me, 8 years removed, like, hey, what you taught me 10 years ago, still helps me. Or the extra time you invested in helping me, get to a certain point, is what helped make a difference and get me to where I am today. So like, that's the best legacy. It's not in the corporate world, it's not return on investment and meeting your EBITDA and all that other stuff and making money. It's, in the end, it comes down to what are the thumbprints you've left on society to make it better than when it was handed to you or an organization. And that's what I'm most proud of on the job side. But again, it's being a dad is something nobody can take away from me, and being a husband is something nobody can ever take away from me. And so living through that and surviving it, and with my family still intact, is what's most important to me.
That's awesome. Yeah, as a father of two, I 100% agree.
Yeah,
I love being a dad.
yeah, it's not easy, but it's also the most rewarding thing, right?
Yep.
So
Your former squadron made some headlines recently in Venezuela. That was pretty impressive what they pulled off there.
yeah, well, it goes back to what we've been talking about for the last hour and 30 minutes now. That
Yep.
it's irrespective of how people feel about the politics or the policies that happened, when you're in that situation, all that stuff goes out the window. They did their mission, they did it well, and they came back alive and in one piece. And that's that's what the organization exists to do, are the missions that others can't. So it's impressive to see that that's still going on. Not that there was ever any doubt, certainly wasn't. But
Well,
it's rewarding to understand that they have that capability. Again, irrespective of the politics, I'm just talking
right.
about the objective
Exactly.
things that
Exactly.
happened. Was it's impressive, 100% impressive.
What do you think based on your experience, what do you think happened to that Blackhawk in DC?
Well, this one kind of touches on a lot of the stuff we're doing for my full-time job now, just in aerospace. Is I'm not flying in the greater DC area, but we have offices there, and I spend a lot of time there. And it's a challenging environment for civil crews and certainly military. And you've got just so much stuff, coming in and out, up and down the river there, going into the capital area. Is that it's a complex airport to get into at Reagan, especially when they land that runway where the accident happened. And having to me, it comes down to, you've got a certain margin of error that was insufficient when you look at the approach path for the American Airlines jet and the helicopter route through there. So it's easy for us to prognosticate and be the armchair quarterback after the fact, and that was a year ago almost, to the day that happened. But I think the first thing people ask are accidents like that preventable? The obvious answer, a lot of, well, in many people's minds, the obvious answer is yes. I think I subscribe to yes, that was probably a preventable accident. But we can't change the outcome. How do we change how we do things going forward? Learning from what's happened with that. I think there's still many lessons learned coming out of that about airspace management, workload management with the FAA and the controllers, crew coordination with the helicopter crew. Just it was a sequence of events. And mind you, if there was a delay of 2 to 3 seconds in that whole sequence of events, they may not have hit each other. But it's just everything came together at the wrong
Right.
time. And my full-time job right now, we're trying to figure out how we can be part of the change to prevent a situation like that through traffic awareness, airspace awareness, aircraft avoidance, and provide better heads up, eyes out flying capabilities, and see if we can be part of the solution. Not because companies want to make money, but we take it personally because I would not want to be in that position where you look up and there's a CRJ that you're about to have a midair with. It's terrible. So
Right.
it's a very, very tragic accident.
Yeah. Well, that's all I have for you, Ryan. I
What do
really
you
appreciate. Go
What do you
ahead.
got for me? Yeah, what's your take on being a former Navy guy in today's world? I got to ask you at least one question.
um, I don't know. It's pretty disappointing, actually. I mean, I don't know I almost don't recognize the country. And like you said, we're uh, keeping politics out. It's just so crazy right now. It's like
Yeah,
I look at see, I do this, to share stories of veterans
yeah,
and like you said, you love sharing, stories of heroism that other people did, right?
yeah,
So I I can appreciate the sacrifices people made and 20-year-olds dying and never having a life, but
yeah,
when I look at people that they died for hating our country, I don't know.
yeah.
I
It's
don't
a
get it.
challenging time. If there's one thing I challenge people to do is get back to where not everybody's going to agree with each other at all times, but
Mhm.
I think we need to really, as a country, focus on being able to have civil disagreements again, right? Like we can recognize that we both feel differently about certain things, but that doesn't mean that I'll hate you if you disagree with me or vice versa. So I still feel like the core of the country is very much intact, and people want to get along and do the right thing, certainly. But it's going to take a lot more effort by everybody on all sides, of the aisle to get back on board with, hey, we used to be able to disagree and still get along in a way and go about our day. Just because we feel differently about certain topics doesn't mean that we hate each other, and we can still be civil, right?
Right. Yeah, people just need to, in my opinion, they need to get out of their comfort zone, have conversations with
Yeah,
people that, they might not normally talk to.
yeah,
This right here is a great platform for me to talk to,
yeah.
different people I've never spoken to, just learning about them. We didn't talk about politics once, and I
No,
don't know, and I don't care how you vote, just like I'm
yeah,
sure you don't about me. This is about
yeah.
you know,
Well, the most
experience and
important, yeah. I think the most important thing, though, I can tell from talking to you for a little bit now, the two of us, is that we still have hope, right?
mhm,
I think at the core, this country wants to be well and do the right thing, and in the end, it all starts with us, right? It's we as people just have to take care of each other and be able to disagree, but still make things better, right? You don't have to agree on everything, and you never will. But I still feel that things are not as bad as they're made out to be. We see all the
right.
negative stuff in the news, on all sides. But I still am proud to be an American. I know you are too, and I'm still, you know, happy that we live in a country where we can do the things that we're allowed to do still,
Yep.
especially with all the other stuff happening in the world right now and in other parts of the world too. So, but no, I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, and it's been great. We'll see what kind of sports season we get this year out of Cleveland baseball,
Mhm.
which will be nice. And
Yeah,
I think I'm tired of winter already. I want it to go away. I want some
I
spring
know, it's
weather.
horrible. Yeah. Well, listen, not just for your service, but for pulling back the curtain on, on a world most people will never see and understand. That's why I loved this conversation and I was really looking forward to it. I know this episode's going to mean a lot to a lot of people and, like I said, thanks again, brother. For me, this was so awesome to get to talk to you.
Yeah, likewise. I really I'm glad we got connected through Matt Previtz, who I got to give him a shout out. So
Yep. Hey, Matt.
he's one of the greatest connectors of people around Northeast Ohio and a great friend. So I'm glad he got us linked up about a year ago, and I'm glad we're able to finally pull it off.
Yep.
And just appreciate that you're doing this and helping people tell stories. And thank you for what you do as well.
Yep. It's an honor for me to be able to do what I do and just being able to talk to people like you. It's such a thrill for me. So I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And like I told you when I texted you today, I got a wooden flag that's coming your way.
Well, that's awesome, man. I appreciate that. I'll buy you at least another cup of coffee for that.
There you go. That's a deal. All right. Well, thank you to your wife and your daughter for letting me take this hour and 40 minutes with you. Tell them I said
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
Of course.
We'll talk again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Joe.
All right.